The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
So what is an 18821 paper? Well, it's no more and no less than a presentation of the project that you've been working on as you've defined it, and an account of the results that you've obtained in studying that problem. And so these findings can come in many different forms. Theoretical mathematics, the gold standard is a proof, a rigorous proof. That's great if you can do it. That's great if the problem admits that kind of thing. But there are many other kinds of findings that you may want to report on in this report as well. You may very well come up with things that you are damn sure are true, but you can't figure out a proof of. They're called conjectures. And if they fit into the frame of the paper, into a coherent story, then absolutely present your conjectures as well as your proven findings. A lot of the physical applied math projects and things, the best you can really do is make observations. You may have a simulation that results in something, and the thing to do is to present your conclusions from the simulation. It's not a formal proof, but it's a perfectly valid finding for the purposes of this paper. So who is this addressed to? Well, the paper should be addressed to people just like you. So actually, it's a pretty wide variety of interests in the class here. And so the actual target audience of different papers by various groups will be somewhat different from each other. That's fine. Just make a paper that you'd like reading yourself. Target audience is a big deal, both in verbal presentations and in writing. And keeping a consistent target audience is something that we always look for. If you give some detailed definition or account of something that's kind of elementary, and then in the next breath you skip over something that's more sophisticated, well, there's a gap, there's a inconsistency in the target audience, and that's a flaw. That's something to avoid. So we'll keep looking out for that. So there are a lot of things that you might think that this report is that it's really not. One thing for sure it's not is an exposition of known results about the project. It's pretty, for some of these projects, it's easy to go to Google and find out things that other people have done. That can be part of your background research, but just giving an account of that is not what we have in mind. You may want to describe what you've discovered from the literature if you did that search, but that's not the main point of the paper. But it's, on the other hand, these aren't really intended to be research papers. It does happen that sometimes teams study these projects and come up with publishable results. So these papers that you're writing now could become a research paper, but that's not really what we have in mind at the first round. Also, usually it takes more than 3 weeks to write a research paper, generally speaking, most of us. And it's not a lab notebook either. So this is a literary exercise. It's not just a listing of the things that you did. It's got structure to it. It's going to go through a rewriting process. So how long should it be? Well, it should be as long as it should be. I don't know how else to put it. You have a certain amount of time. You want to tell a story. In practice, this means that it's not going to be much shorter than 10 pages because you need to introduce the problem and tell what you've done about it. If it gets to be much more than 10 pages, then you're probably putting in things that are sort of tangential to what the main point is, and you should be more concise. So 10 or 12 pages is typical length for these papers. And if there's, you know, as we go through this revision process and the 3 papers, you'll get a better sense of what the right sort of level of concision is. I don't know how else to say it. So I wouldn't worry that much about the length issue. You'll get used to that. Now, literature comes in many different styles, and in this course we made the decision that we would adopt one particular style, which is the mathematical research journal style. It's actually quite a well-defined literary style with particular usages and a particular structure. And that's the style, that's the type of writing that this course is designed to get you good at. If you've taken seminars here, that's generally speaking, it's the same style as you may have written in papers for seminars. But that's the style that I'll be talking about here. So as a structural thing, Mathematics Journal article almost always has these components to it. It's got a title, it's got an abstract, and we'll talk in detail about what each one of these things means. It's got an introduction. It may have a separate section that fills in background that is not original with the paper, but needed to understand the paper. Then there's the body of the work, which may have several sections and have a complicated structure in its own. Then with correct spelling, you've got appendices that may or may not be there, that carry out things that that don't fit so naturally into the paper, like code, for example, might go into an appendix. And there are references at the end to literature that you've used. So let's begin with the top one here. So what I'm going to do here is talk about a paper that came out of the very same project that Nat and Saul talked about on Tuesday. So it's a paper about coloring dots, and you've seen the work, so you know the mathematics now. The only question is, how does it appear when you write it up in a paper? And so we'll look at the various different parts of this paper, and we'll look at a number of different ways of approaching the problem of writing this paper, writing the different sections of this paper, and think about how successful they are in meeting the demands of that section. So let's begin with the title and the abstract. So here's a title, here's the paper. And there's an abstract. By the way, a remark about these slides, this is a workshop on literature, so there's going to be a lot of words on these slides. Many more words than you generally want to put into a slide when you're making a presentation of mathematics. So don't take this as an example, and the subsequent slides will have a lot more words. Don't take that as an example of what your slides should look like in a presentation. Well, let's see. So what should a title do? It should convey the subject matter. And there's this tension between being punchy and brief and eye-catching and being accurate and honest about what your paper actually does. General rule is you should try to avoid symbols in a title, because people will quote the title, and symbols are often not easily quoted. They don't translate very well. So, and moreover, they're just sort of unfriendly to have a symbol in a title. So I'm going to go to the abstract here as well. The purpose of an abstract is to give a very brief outline of the contents of the paper. And there's no attempt, doesn't need to be any attempt to give the meaning of the words. It's something that a professional might look at to see what's in the paper. Typically, there are collections of abstracts, and they're a way for somebody in the field to look through papers quickly, a list of papers quickly, and decide whether they want to get into them or not. So they're generally very brief and sort of can be fairly ruthless in their language. So I don't think that the K there does anything except annoy the reader, as far as I can tell. It might make it look more professional or something, but actually it doesn't make it look more professional. So there's an improvement. What other improvements could we make, do you think, to this title, just the title?
Get rid of all the ofs.
There's an awful lot of ofs in there too, aren't there? So, but how would you do that?
Get rid of
Enumerating colorings.
Enumerating colorings.
You don't need to say
So-
that's colorings. of
That's like
colors.
maybe less sort of formal sounding. I don't know.
Well, enumerating colorings, so that's nice. One thing I like about that is that there's a verb. Enumerating it is a verb, although it's a gerund or something. But getting something active into a title is great. It's part of being punchy. But enumerating, anything missing from enumerating colorings?
Arc colorings.
What?
It has to be arc colorings.
Okay.
Would you color anything other than arcs?
Well, if you just have the title, you could color, I don't know, the Statue of Liberty. I mean,
Well, enumerating color. I mean, if you think enumerating colorings versus enumeration of colorings is a single change that you can factor out.
absolutely. Enumerating colorings of arcs and projection. Okay. Right.
Um,
I thought you were meaning to have enumerating colorings as the complete title. And then I was
Absolutely.
concerned that there were no knots in the title. But
That would not be good.
I'll say not projections instead of projections.
Yes.
Enumerating colorings of not projections.
Assuming not projection. The question is, the standard terminology matters, right? Because I assume these knots and these projections are well-known standard mathematical objects. So whatever the
Yeah.
terms of art are here.
Yeah, that would do. That's sufficiently standard. Right. So that's a good one. That would be a big improvement over
So
this
not
title.
projections versus projections of a not K.
Right. Right, exactly. Making sequences of nouns does make things more compact. It can be overused, though, and becomes kind of ugly after a while. But I think enumerating not projections is a much, much better title. I agree completely. How about the abstract? Does it succeed in...
As a typo.
There's either a typo or somebody didn't just use grammar correctly. I agree. Ways of coloring the arcs, plane projection of a knot. And I guess that readers of grammar manuals will take issue with the use of the word which as opposed to that in that context. Okay, but this, for me, what do you think? This abstract doesn't seem too bad. It says what's there pretty well. What do you think, Matt? It's okay. You have any
So our
improvement to it?
papers supposed to have abstracts, by the way.
What?
Our papers, do our papers have abstracts?
Absolutely. Put in an abstract. Let's look at another example of another solution to these two problems. Here's the second version. So let's even punchier. It's probably not. It's not as accurate as yours because it doesn't talk about enumerating them. But
This would definitely, if it was like a talk, this would definitely be a much better thing.
it just would draw the audience in, wouldn't it? They'd all come to the talk. Huh?
The abstract doesn't. First of all, doesn't say anything, and what it does say is wrong.
Man.
So it's not that enumeration of these colorings gives rise to a not invariant.
Really?
Right? Like, I mean, if you could already enumerate the colorings. Oh, I mean, it just sounds
So
weird.
we'll see in the body of the paper that that you count the number of different proper 3 colorings, and that number is not invariant.
Oh,
It
okay.
is in fact the enumeration of them, the number of them.
Okay.
So I guess maybe it's a misuse of the word enumeration. Maybe I agree.
Okay,
with
yeah,
you
this
on
use
that.
of the word enumeration was not clear.
It's
I was
maybe
thinking
not
something
quite-
like enumerating all possible,
that's-
all possible like types of coloring classes there were.
Ah, okay, good. Good. Yeah, I'm not talking about coloring schemes. I'm talking about colorings of a given scheme. So, isn't language great? Okay, so at least it got rid of the spelling error.
Oh, well, should the authors be ordered by alphabetical?
Great question. Why in the world does B row occur second in front of C low? Every discipline has their own standards about what order the authors come in. I understand biology puts the lead author last, for example. Mathematics almost always has straight alphabetical.
And it's alphabetical in the
Last name.
Okay.
Alphabetical in the last name. So I suppose that this was alphabetized by the first name. Well, that's a little bit non-standard. All right, that's a good point. So that's a further defect of this title thing. Okay, but surely the title is a lot better. Although maybe enumerating not colorings might be better. Even though it's a little inaccurate, right? Because we're not coloring knots. We're coloring knot projections. But you see, it's okay. It's okay. All right. So that's the title and the abstract. Next section is the introduction. So the introduction is supposed to be the hook. A lot of papers, they get read or not read completely according to how good the introduction is. And so here's your one chance to get the reader involved in your paper. I'm not going to read past it if you can't see what's going on from the introduction. So the introduction has several different purposes, though. It's a summary of what the paper is about, the context of the problem. It's a summary of what the paper achieves. It should say something about the methods that are used in the work. And then it ends with a description of the structure of the paper into sections, basically. And then generally, there will be acknowledgments as well, which happen at the end of the introduction. That's the way I write papers. In this case, you will probably have a lot of, you'll have gotten a lot of help from your mentor, but that's sort of understood. And I think generally speaking, the mentor doesn't have to be thanked specifically. We understand that. But you do have to thank each other as well. And you'll see what I mean by that. So let's look at an example. So questions to ask. So we're going to look at a sample introduction. And as we look at it, here are the questions that we want to ask. So does it succeed in giving an intuitive understanding of the question? Why would anyone think of looking at this problem? And why is it deep? And what's your approach? And does it do this thing at the end? Here's an introduction to this paper about knot coloration. So I'll let you read this for a minute. So from the bottom up, this is the kind of acknowledgement of your teammates that I want to see. At the end of the introduction, say who was in charge of writing which parts of the paper. Yeah.
Can't the bottom two paragraphs just be replaced by like the table of contents with names?
Short papers usually don't have tables.
They what?
Short papers usually don't have tables.
Yeah. A table of contents is a pretty heavy piece of apparatus for a short paper. If you have a 60-page paper, then it probably makes sense.
Actually, section 7 is mentioned in the bottom paragraph, but not
Well, so there's
Maybe
an
conclusions?
either C. Lowe didn't get her work into the paper, or they forgot to say what section 7 is about. But anyway, so let me say something about this also. These papers, they form a whole. They'll be written by a team. We all know about the course that was designed by a team, by a committee. You have to work to make your different pieces of writing cohere and come together. So the whole team is responsible for the paper as a whole, but individuals will have written different sections of the paper, and we want to hear who is the one in charge of each of those different sections. We will be making discriminations within the team to some extent because we all get different grades in the class. So this is a tension that exists whenever a class depends upon teamwork, and we do the best we can to be fair to everybody and give credit where it's due. So I hope that was a completely ambiguous statement, but it's the best I can do. So this acknowledgement should be there. Working up from the bottom, this to my eye, it describes the sections. It's a little boring, isn't it? But at least it's clear. I always find this particular part of an introduction a little boring but useful. So clear and simple is fine, I would say. How about the top paragraph?
It's kind of a stylistic issue, which is the sentence, many not theorists have devoted a lot of time. So like most of this is written in a sort of semi-formal fashion, and the word a lot does not seem, or the phrase a lot does not seem to fit well into the writing. Like that sentence kind of supposed to stand out, being a little more informal.
In fact, this whole evocation of the community of not theorists seems a little out of place.
Yeah, it's probably not that.
A little bit odd.
Well, I'm trying to think, I mean, because I feel like that statement is an important one, but describing what not theorists have done is kind of, I don't know, like much interest has been devoted into classifying knots or something would be.
Yep, I agree.
A better way to describe.
I agree.
The second sentence should probably not be separated with a colon there, and it might make more sense to replace the word is with asks.
Where are you looking?
The main, I would say, the main question, not theory, asks.
The
how
question
is-
Oh, I see.
People ask, right?
The main question is how can we tell?
It's separated.
You think that's a problem with that? Grammatically, they say that should be capitalized if it's a complete sentence.
Yeah. Seems fine.
American versus British style. Like, this really is one of those points.
Also, I feel like the number of people who like know that and care is
No
not
what?
that large.
No
consists
what?
of-
They know and care about that kind of capitalization.
Oh, okay.
issue.
All right, that's fine. But how many people know what a knot is? I mean, there's a basic assumption that's being made here that we all know what a knot is. So this is a matter of deciding on your audience. If the audience is this class, well, now this class does know what a knot is because we attended a presentation about knots on Tuesday, but otherwise that's probably not something you should assume. And then there's this notion of deformation. It's a bit of a stretch, I would say, this beginning thing.
Should I be saying things or should I be actually listening to the work?
Go for it, Saul.
This line about the Volson table of fine knots makes it look like it's the culmination of the entire subject of knot theory.
The Bible of knot theory. Yeah.
Probably, I don't know much about the knot theory literature, but it's probably a misrepresentation.
Right. So this is a question of the audience. If I think you should be writing this paper to your peers, and I think we could have a discussion about this, but my sense is that you probably want to say something about what a knot is, because I have knots on my shoes here, but they're not knots in the sense that we mean. Here's the set of questions that we were looking at. Well, how about the second question? Does it express the author's approach to this problem? Nothing, zero. There's no hint.
Not colors just buried at the end of the list.
No hint. It's
Very
like
odd,
it's
yeah.
like there's a missing paragraph in there.
Having not colorings in that list is also kind of odd because unless it means something else, the not colorings are what is being developed in this paper, and they're kind of listing with all this prior well-known body of work.
Right, exactly. And that there's no hint about what they mean by coloring. Right.
Yeah, so I assume the introduction would be a good place to put a definition of that kind of thing, or at least an intuitive definition.
I think so. Let's see what the next version of this does. So here's a second version. Same paper, different version of an introduction.
So this is missing the second two paragraphs of the introduction, but presumably those would go after this.
That's right. It's missing the acknowledgments and it's missing the structure of the paper.
This is actually helpful.
What do you think? Comments?
Oh wait, the one thing that's weird on Mr. Moves is used a little bit too. I feel like they should at least have a shout out to what reader Mr. Moves are here now.
At the very, that's the last word that appears here. Being German, he would say Reidemeister. Yes. This is getting into, he's describing the method of proof here. Let's see. In fact, that's the only description of the method of proof. That one sentence is the only description of what he has. Yeah, then.
I'm just wondering about this whole, like, just the whole mathematical content of this, and maybe this is completely beside the point, but, like, it's weird, it seems weird to me that this is a paper talking about three-color ability using Reidemeister moves as given. Like, it seems like the whole proving the Reidemeister move, you know, that they, like, generate knots is...
But that's more known.
Is what?
It seems like it's much more substantial and harder to do than any, like, it seems like the three-color ability thing is an easy consequence of that. I don't know.
Well, but isn't that the way science is? You stand on the shoulders of giants and take
Yeah.
a small step.
I mean, did they, like, not discover three-color ability before they, like, figured out how to show this Reidemeister thing?
In fact, Reidemeister came about 100 years before three-color ability.
Wow. Okay, never mind then.
So I feel like this thing about the Reidemeister moves could just be fixed by putting something vague in front of it.
Yes,
that can
it's
describe
like,
it.
for example, case-by-case analysis of the so-called Reidemeister
Or,
moves or something.
or a little bit more than that, you could say case-by-case analysis, or like a simple class of moves.
Or it's a class of moves that generates not the so-called Reidemeister.
In fact, Reidemeister moves don't happen on a knot, do they? They happen on a knot projection. So the whole concept of the knot projection is skipped over here.
Mentioned in this introduction.
It seems to me that's part of the method. That's the main part of the method. Should be part of it.
Because in fact, actually, yeah, because actually the three colors are technically defined on the projection.
On knot projection, right? So it's a theorem that it's invariant under Reidemeister moves, and therefore an invariant of the knot. So yeah, I agree. This is too brief to be really to fulfill the promise of an introduction. What else?
The DNA in general is kind of weird. It's not much. It's kind of odd, but
You're just some random biologist who happens to be reading a paper in mathematics.
I've
Doesn't this
seen
draw
real
you in?
papers that do things
But it's wrong.
almost that. I've seen real papers that do things almost that silly though. I think people do this to like get funding or something.
Yes.
Why is it wrong, Susie?
Well, the word approximately is key.
But it's
not
like,
a knot.
but I mean, once you put in the approximate, the whole point of knots are these like formal algebraic objects. You totally lose that.
So I do wonder what the reference one is here. There is work about
Probably
using
someone
knot
else
theory
wrote it.
to analyze. There's topoisomerases that cut specific knots in DNA strands. As a matter of fact, So it's not an empty thing. It's not false to say that knot theory has applications to study of DNA. But you were asking how far out from the focus of the paper should these motivating things be? I don't know. I think maybe biology is a little bit of a stretch. That's my sense.
NIH.
Yeah, well, okay, they may get funding from them. Maybe that's what it counts for. That's what you were thinking too, isn't it? It's a little bit of a stretch. Yeah. But this is actually very, very common thing to see in papers. Sort of things get mixed in a strange way. We're mathematicians, though. Okay, other comments about this introduction?
So, should the introduction really have its own non-linear definitions or precise statements?
Should the introduction have any definitions or any actual precise statements? What do you think, Sal?
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes.
It's like I feel like I've seen some papers that have like an introduction section with testing definitions. And I think I've seen some papers that have an introduction section and then another section under that like has definitions.
Yes.
And then goes into the
Yes.
paper.
Yes. It's a nice practice to separate out precise a separate section that contains a precise statement of results. Many papers will do that. I think it is a judgment call. If the definition is so in these 10-page papers, you know, a definition has an environment. It has to have some space. It occupies some space. I think it's kind of a bit heavy for these papers, and if the precise theorem or statement that you're interested that you want to bring out is convenient to make it precise, fine. But but there's no need to do it. You should feel compelled to do it. I think. How am I doing? Yeah.
Stylistically, is it good to present future results where so the phrase I'm looking at is it will turn out that three-colorability of the knot is the knot variant?
How about the tense?
I kind of like that. That seems natural to me.
What about
Interesting.
we prove? Yeah.
We is definitely standard.
We prove.
We prove that three-colorability of the knot is the knot variant.
The best part is that the we can pass me even if it is a single object.
Yeah.
Where,
I don't know, it just seems
where
like
does it say we
recipe
prove?
papers,
Oh,
present
you're
tense.
saying
So instead
it
of
will
it
turn
will-
out that?
Oh, I see.
So that would put it in the present tense. What do you think about the tense issue, Susan?
I think that present tense is more common than future because the paper exists in the present, the entire paper exists in the
But on the
present.
other hand, if you say it turns out, that this particular sentence will not flow well when it turns out.
Right, so
So maybe these are written.
that is an argument for an exception.
So I don't actually mind the future tense here, but once you get there, you have to stay there. It will turn out, but then the proof that is, and you go back to the present tense after that. So there's an inconsistency in the tense
Well, no,
there.
the proof that three colorability is an invariant is fine. It should be the proof that three colorability is an invariant
Will use. That's correct. That's the wrong tense. Right. So I guess future is, you know, it's a little edgy, and you have to be careful of it and use it correctly. Yeah. Hi.
I
Rachel.
think like the bigger problem there is that it's not clear if that is something that you come up with or something that just follows or
Okay.
it's like something that was there and you just mentioned it.
Okay, this is a really important point, which is relevant to an introduction. In writing these papers, it's absolutely critical that things which you learned from somewhere else are distinguished from things which you discover for yourself. That's absolutely the most critical distinction that you can make in the paper. And that already can take place in the introduction. And it's not clear that this does this. Our project studies, it will turn out it's not invariant. So as I read this, the implication is that they did this work. And if that's correct, I think that's fine. If it's not correct, it's not fine. Do you have the same sense that this implies that the team did this work? Yeah.
But it could be clearer.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the use of the italicized sentences on certain words.
Yep.
Is it you just use it whenever it feels natural?
So like here, three color.
Non-invariance,
Non-invariance, right.
So it's when you have a concept that's you want to introduce, and it's a keyword that would probably get because it's weaker than a definition.
Definitely, but it
it's
calls
stronger
attention
than
to the fact that this is maybe something that you hadn't seen before. It's not. It's saying this is a new word. I'm not. You shouldn't. You shouldn't search through your memory to try to figure out where this word appeared before because you're not remembering it. Stuff like that. That's a function of italicization. What do you think about
A
italicization?
convention that is used sometimes in textbook publishing is to italicize the word when it appears before being formally defined.
Which is what you're suggesting. It's.
But that has to be done carefully because if it hasn't been formally defined, italicizing it is not sufficient. You still need to
Yeah.
give that context so that people can know what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, and it has to be explained. Just italicizing it doesn't. People will often do this. I've seen this happen in the mathematical literature 100 times. People will italicize a word, give you this word, and then you're supposed to attach some significance to it by some kind of magic, despite the fact that there's no explanation given to it. Just the fact that it's italicized somehow is supposed to make it mean something. It's a very. I don't think that happens here, though. He says 3 colorings of nuts. If there were just a period here, then I would object to that. But he says it's ways of labeling segments with 3 possible labels, and so that's sort of explained.
And that doesn't preclude you from formally defining it.
Well, also,
Absolutely.
This thing is very far from me because ways of labeling segments with 3 possible labels. What the constraints are on this
Absolutely.
is actually very important.
It's
for
very important.
Any idea of 3 colorings.
And so we could have a discussion about whether this is within the bounds of informality that's appropriate for an introduction or not. I don't think
But
there's.
so I kind of feel like you can't actually have any understanding of what the papers have been trying to do,
Well, so-
except at the level of it's a non-invariant, unless you know.
So I think this is
Unless
appropriate,
you-
right? Because it's using it as a keyword, not as a definition. And then, like I said, this doesn't stop you from formally defining it later more accurately. But it's to call attention to the fact that this is a keyword that's going to be in the paper.
Of course, there's an inaccuracy here. Segments of a knot. They don't mean a knot. They mean a knot projection. And so I still think that in this introduction they have to say something about projections because that's the key thing. And they sort of skip over that.
I have
Katrina.
a question though. Well, I come from Bulgaria and I've read a lot of papers there, and people mostly use passive voice. But in English,
They
people
use
mostly passive voice,
passive. Yep.
and in English, people mostly use active voice.
Yep.
So, do I need to use active voice more?
What about the issue of active versus passive?
Well, often in English-speaking papers, sciences other than mathematics, you see that passive voice used all the way through.
Really?
Yeah.
More than in normal English, still.
Yeah, the we thing, any kind of mathy thing, like heavily uses the we. It's not the royal we, right? It's not. At least the information I've always heard is that it's we, the author, and the reader.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course there's an ambiguity here because it's we 3 as well as we, the author and the reader.
But the point is, even if there are only one author, it would still be we.
It could
be
be.
terrible to do I there.
So you'll see both, but we, I think, is more traditional and maybe more formal, I would say. The issue of passive is a very interesting one. I think in English, passive is regarded as a little bit passive. There's no inhibition. You shouldn't have an inhibition against using the active voice. It's more immediate, it's more efficient, and
My impression in mathematics is that active is usually preferred because it's seen as livelier and more interesting. But in order to do active UD teams,
So like a picture could be a good addition to even an introduction section?
Absolutely.
Picture.
Shall we go on to the next one? Let's see. What are the things we're looking at here? Does it give a good intuitive grasp? This one's better, isn't it?
Much
There's
better.
something. Author's approach to the problem, not completely, but better. They still don't talk about not projection, which is an essential part of there. And then we know that it doesn't talk about the structure and ecology.
But you can more or less paste on the...
You could paste that on, right. Let's look at one more. So, isn't it amazing? There's no right way to do these things. There's every...
Like there are various ingredients they could have pulled from all these questions that would have been...
So we can paste them together. What do you not like about this one?
Theorem.
You don't like the theorem there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So also, so the theorem is not terrible, but what I don't like is that this is actually it's going into this extra formality, but it's actually not, unlike the one, it's not actually telling you any of what this means. Eyes or right,
yeah, right.
Recoloring.
Right. It violates all of the things that we say, that you have to prepare the way and get the reader on board before you make a statement. It's all missing.
I mean, if they had the theorem and then had all of the definition and stuff right under it, I don't think that'd be terrible.
Well,
Maybe stylistically a little worse than the other way around.
So following the use of a word with a description of what the word means, I would say it's high risk behavior.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
yes.
I feel like I've seen...
Definitely you've seen it. Definitely you've seen it. People engage in high risk behavior.
The
Right.
reason it's high-risk behavior is because a normal reading strategy is to make sure that you've understood everything you've read. And so if you come to a period and you haven't understood what you just read, you may stop and puzzle over it before you read on.
So there's anxiety created, there's tension created in the reader, which may be your intention. That can be a good thing, but there has to be a payback at some point, and things get rewarded and consolidated pretty quickly. It's high risk.
It's also a bit weird that the theorem starts with a number, like the 3 color versus.
You think that that's a little strange, especially in the second sentence of the introduction. I mean, this is really part of the structure of the paper that he's inserting up here right at the head. I agree. That's kind of strange to have there. So there's a lot missing from this, isn't it? At least he makes some attempt to say, what this deformation thing is. It's genuinely knotted.
But I feel like going into a specific example before giving a high-level overview is like not the most effective. The example could possibly, like, maybe that sentence, the trefoil thing, could have been added to like version 2 of the introduction after explaining what a knotted variant is or something. But here, the example is not really sufficient to. You can't really fairly expect the reader to immediately extrapolate what all those sentences mean just from that example.
Absolutely. No, one needs much more description of what's going on up here. There's colorability, knot, invariant, Weidemeister, and so on are just mysterious in that. I agree. Very brief description of the strategy.
I like that part.
There's some virtue to it, right? Maybe a little brief, but it has to be confined to this slide. Let's see. Yeah. So that's all we have for that version of the introduction. So they do some good things a little better, some things a little worse. I agree. So now I'm not going to keep doing these introductions. I do want to talk about some other section of it. But here we go. Here are some pictures at the beginning. Do you believe that's the unknot? I have a problem with these two pictures in that they're not parallel with each other. They're taken from different sources. That's kind of odd. So you can see that pictures in the introduction really do perk it up, don't they? You can come back to it. This is on the website. All right, but look at all this text. I'm not going to. I think I want to move on to the next section here. You can see there's a lot of things. He talks about what the trefoil is. Says what a knotted variant is. He doesn't say about knot projections. Talks about segments of a knot, naughty, right? Gotta be. All right, I'm going to move on here. then there's the description of the sections and the acknowledgments. All right, so okay, it's 1:15. I want to. There's a lot more to this presentation. I'm going to go on a little bit further, but I'm not going to get to the end of it. Okay. But let's keep talking about the qualities of writing. I think this is a really great discussion about the quality of writing and what's important in writing, in the small as well as in the role that the different sections of the paper play. So sometimes you're going to need to gather information that isn't really part of the research that you're doing, but it's background. Maybe it's notation, maybe it's state definitions or theorems that you will use and just don't want to have interrupt the flow of work when you come to describe your own work later on. It sets up the context that you're going to work in more detail than you would do in an introduction. So it's quite common for people, for papers to have a background section like this, although it's not a necessary part of these papers. But we have to know that the contents are going to be used. The level of detail is now full detail. You have to be completely clear and accurate about things that you say. You can't just introduce things that aren't going to be used later, and it has to be well organized. Okay, so maybe we'll just look at one of these and think about how. So this is a typical thing. You want to know what a knot is before we can start talking about coloring of knot projections. It feels like there's a big paragraph in front of the definition that's missing. What are we doing here?
Okay, so another weird nitpicky point is the phrase time reversal here. Maybe that's sometimes an intuitive way to think about T minus T, but that is not the term I would use, or that is not the way I would think about when I think about it. Not. I don't think that convention is time.
Yeah, this was a problem in the presentation on Tuesday too. Noah, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if you need to introduce oriented knot if you're only considering unoriented knots, or
But you
maybe
can't really
just
define an unoriented knot easily without how
Well, if you're going to define a knot as a function from the reals, it's going to be an oriented knot.
So maybe don't define it as a function from the reals.
So this is a huge question. What use is the rest of the body of the paper going to make of this exact definition?
I feel like just to make sure the reader knows what a knot is, and have an understanding of how they could translate the things into formality.
So ultimately, it's going to use a knot projection in Reidemeister moves, right? And so this
But
form.
how do you know? What does it mean for two knot projections to describe the same knot? If you can't answer that question, then you don't have any.
Wait, what? Why can't you just define it as like an embedding of S1 or something? It seems like much more reasonable.
That's what the definition. Oh, I see. You could define it as an apple.
Well, I mean,
you still have the oriented and unoriented.
S1 does have an orientation, so.
Sure.
But I'm asking the question, when we actually start to work and talk about knot colorations, we're going to use a knot projection, right? And I have the question about whether we really need this kind of formal definition of a knot, if that's the work that we're going to do in the end. I have my doubts about it. There is a literature out there that you can refer the reader to be precise about what a knot is and prove the theorem that knot projections of that particular form exist, and prove the theorem that Reidemeister moves translate between them. But I'm not so sure you really need a precise definition of this if you're not going to use it.
That definition is very low cost. So if you don't care about the definition, it's in this nicely labeled definition section. It starts with and then you just skip.
I think there's a high mental cost to include definitions that are somewhat extraneous. I think there's like a readability cost in there.
Absolutely. It's a cost. It's a great way to put it.
I think the definition of K as that gives the nice image of K.
To say take K of R, and so that focuses your attention. Well, so there's a little bit. I agree with you. It's important that they make that they say that what really matters somehow in your mind is the image. in fact, in case we consider, but I'm wondering about the word we consider here. It's a little bit strange.
I mean, you can argue that that's verging into informality, but that particular use does not seem damaging at all. Although, I mean, possibly they could try to re-architect the definition to be.
So this definition in tech, this is created by an environment. You say, begin definition, and what follows is going to be a definition, and then you say end definition. And inside that environment, what should be there is the definition, and it should be an accurate definition, not just an approximate definition. So I have a problem with what happens down here. Definition, two knots are isotopic, da 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 da. Okay, unoriented knots, da, da, da. And then it says the intuitive image is da da da. This isn't part of the definition
I actually think that
anymore.
it might even be better to give an intuition first outside of the definition block.
Yep.
And then give a formal definition.
Yep, I agree. If you need the formal definition, and I'm questioning whether you really need it here at all.
But you see, I don't know.
Also,
But, the word kink is vague enough that.
Okay. So I want to move on to a different section here. So there's more of this. If you want to have fun critiquing stuff, this is a little better, isn't it? Look, he set it's the same definition, but he set these out, separated them a little bit.
And he gives a kind of intuitive-ish.
Yep.
explanation
He
of the
begins
structure
with this
and
introductory
like-
stuff. That's much nicer. So more background. So here's a background choice that doesn't. This is almost an introduction, isn't it? It's could be part of an introduction. But I think that well, this is just one paragraph in a longer background section, and I suspect that when they come to do the work, they won't need more detail than this.
That's interesting. Defining and not projections directly. Which is more relevant.
I have a problem about ordinary self-intersections
No,
because
thanks.
it's.
Go to the next sentence.
Hmm?
Next sentence was on. Although actually, ordinary self-intersections is vague enough and confusing enough for maybe some of this.
Well, moreover, this allows tangencies, which is not allowed in a not projection, so it's a little bit inaccurate.
Is that also part of the definition of ordinary self-intersection?
All right, there's more to this. There's a picture. That's a wonderful picture, isn't it? All right. Presentation of results. So any two mathematicians will write the same results quite differently. There's really a lot of variation in how you present mathematics. But there are a lot of rules and conventions that really have to be satisfied if you're going to be legible and it's going to be good mathematical literature. So we'll just look at one of these things, and here are some questions to ask about the section involving the body of work that you're presenting. So like we were saying, the really important thing, maybe the most important thing, is that it's clear what the status of statements are. Are they things which you claim to have proven? Are they things which you are quoting from literature? Are they guesswork? What are they? And making it clear what role each paragraph or each sentence plays is really important. Connectivity is incredibly important, and I think that in the commentaries in our critiques of your first drafts, you'll see a lot of commentary about getting connectivity between different sentences and different paragraphs. We'll make a lot of comments about that. It's a big deal. It's surprisingly important in making a paper easy to read to get the connectivity correct. And of course, are the arguments correct? And are they correctly presented? Meaning, does the presentation follow the standard rules of mathematical presentation? So maybe just one example, or maybe we'll do two examples of this. So here's another So we've done the background, we've done an introduction, we've done a background, we're starting in on the work. Here's the first section of the body of the paper.
I feel like this is bad for people who are not familiar with whatever the conventions around writing master books are. Let's
just
expect people to know what type 1, type 2, and type 3 already refer to.
Absolutely, that's part of the background.
Use of them is kind of really weird.
Well, it's part of the background. They've seen 1, 2, and 3. That's,
So if that has already been put in,
yeah,
then
that's
it's
part of the
much more
background.
reasonable.
Should we just look at another one to see a contrast?
This is completely missing the high level.
You have the same sense? It's something we're just thrown into the water here somehow. It's nice to say slightly indirect. But and again, I would like to see some guidance, like you were suggesting in the front of that. What about the title of the section? No?
So this
Sorry.
this is to be interpreted as a section, like a section heading main theorem, and then right under that another bold item. I feel like having 2 bold items in a row is just sort of bad if you can avoid it at all. Maybe just a couple of words in between would be probably good.
It's called guidance. It's a essential part of a paper to ease the reader along.
They probably wouldn't actually do anything except separate the 2 bold items.
Maybe not.
But that's like okay with me.
But I think over here we had the previous example of this other cyber section.
Yep.
It's actually like not terrible as a high level overview of how a proof works. You can basically plot that in and then go and then dive into the details.
I wonder if there's a more imaginative title for the section than main theorem. Something that carries some more content to it somehow. There's a lemma.
Isn't it? Do all papers need to have titles for the sections? Because of course the uncreated section should be named like section 3. Or is that not really?
So readers often want to be active. Imagine you're a reader, you read the introduction and you think, oh, this part sounds interesting, or so you skim through the paper and you want to find things. If you have meaningful titles, then people can find things.
Okay, good.
I think an image would go very well here. They're trying to describe this matrix that they're constructing.
Oh, I see.
Wouldn't it be great to have an example? Here's a definition. The ijth entry of aij is blah, blah, blah.
You have a little figure on the side that didn't really, so you didn't really have to interrupt the flow of the text. But
So math papers are usually pretty one-column affairs. They're pretty linear. This sidebars aren't really part of the picture. But you could easily have interrupt this with an example of the trefoil or something and say it would add enormous amount to that. I agree. Here's a lemma, sort of early, I would say here. No proof following the lemma. Is that okay?
Unless it's about maybe proven somewhere else.
Say what?
It should be proven somewhere.
I guess it should be proven somewhere, unless, I guess the absence of any indication makes me think, well, maybe he'll come back to that. But I would like to hear that he'll come back to that. It would make it better if there was some assurance that, yeah, we'll come back and prove
A lot
that.
of the time they'll just give a reference.
Sorry?
A lot of the time they'll just give a reference.
But his lemma is in some sense novel. It's not,
Yeah, you could, right. If it was something that they got from the literature, then it would need a reference. But by not giving a reference here, they're saying that they proved it. So.
I mean, you could try to give it some slightly more polite version of left as an exercise to the reader.
Yes, absolutely. You could say we leave
Or
this.
you could do
We
like the
leave
worst
this.
thing possible.
Absolutely.
Just like,
Proof is easy to reconstruct in the details.
Absolutely.
when you have a statement like that, sometimes when you try to write out a proof, it's a total mess, and yet it's an extremely easy, basically tautologous lemma. So,
And?
I mean, it's the nice thing
So where do you go with that?
I don't know. I'm observing. I'm observing that you might make this section look a lot more messy by including a full proof there. And so maybe you want to give a verbal idea of a proof. It's bad form to say this follows immediately from the definition.
There's also like a common line where you could, I'm not sure if I've seen this done in research, but where you could say something like, so, you know, an intuitive explanation is this, and then you could say, like, you don't actually have, somehow say you don't actually have to read this formal proof, but here it is if you want it.
Yeah, I always feel like I'm being jerked around somehow by a paper that says, you don't have to read this if you don't want to. I mean, I want him to tell me what I should read. And that's why I feel. Saul is saying that a proof would be pretty distracting
I think I have
immediately
something like,
following
you
here.
include a proof for completeness. I think I have seen that.
Yeah, I know. I've seen these things too. I agree with Saul that to put a proof of this right here would, right here in the second paragraph, third paragraph of the proof of your main theorem is probably a little out of place.
And it seems like the kind of thing that you could probably verify easily.
Well, maybe, who knows? But maybe something, I think.
It's like 1 + 2.
So I think two things here. I think that the author was smart not to put a proof here, but it would have, but dumb to have not told us something about whether we were going to see a proof or not and where to find it. That's my sense about that. Now, so I've sort of run through this. You can have fun reading this and making your own judgments about how successful they are in meeting these requirements. In these papers, it will certainly happen that you will know things that you can't prove, although you wish you could, or just statements that don't admit proofs because they're simulations or something. And I just wanted to give an example of how that looks. Same questions. The same questions pertain. Is the status of each statement clear? Is the connectivity clear? We didn't actually talk about connectivity in the words that we were just looking at. And are the arguments correct and correctly presented? So here's section 4. This is stuff that these authors wish that they could have had something to say about. All they have is experimental evidence.
Is use of experimental
It's pretty standard in 18821 papers.
Okay. Well, then, because I find that it's experimental fact, because the statement that comes after that is not actually a statement about their experiment. It is a general statement that may or may not be true.
Yes, I agree.
So I feel like you should either not describe it, you describe it as a conjecture instead of an experimental fact.
I
Or if
agree.
you made an experimental fact, you want to change the phrasing in some way. to
The
reflect what
evidence.
they actually
I agree. This is badly worded. Maybe that's what you were saying. It's badly worded. This isn't the experimental facts are down here. This is a conjecture. It's incorrectly phrased. But at least it's saying this is something that we believe to be true, but we know we can't prove, and that's important. But I don't like the first sentence.
Oh, because that sounds like you can actually make a stronger proof, but a conjectured strengthening of...
See, it's ambiguous because at the end they quote literature which would prove that the number of 3 colorings is a non-invariant.
Wait, no, the literature they quote is from 4.2, I thought.
Well,
That's what it sounds like to me.
in fact, 4.2 is a refinement of 4.1.
It's not.
No, they don't say
No, I'm sorry, I guess it's not. But anyway, yeah, so what I said is not quite correct. This literature would certainly show that the number of 3 colorings is a non-invariant. So so that first sentence fails the test of being clear about, or the first pair of sentences. It fails that test. It's not clear what they mean. It can be strengthened as follows. Yes, because you find that it's in literature, or no, because we don't know. Maybe it can be strengthened.
Also, wait, the lesson you look at the channels on here, exploring the fact problem too actually seems like they actually that fact is simple enough that they actually could put it in an actual proof. Because it seems like it follows directly from the
Well,
algebra.
I mean, now that's a non-literary comment. But whether they could have gone on to prove this or not is.
So I don't find 4.1, see.
So they very nicely, I think, describe the experimentation that they did. And then I like to think that the team discovered this, which I find quite amazing. The number of colorings is 3 to the n minus 3. What do you know? And they have a lot of experimental evidence for it. And somebody went out and looked at the literature and found a proof of it. So I agree. I think that experimental fact is not a well-chosen word here. And I have a problem with the ambiguity of the status of statements at the beginning.
But the actual description of stuff, of what they did is pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
You said that this shouldn't be a lab notebook, right? This looks kind of like a lab notebook to me.
This isn't everything they did.
Yeah, I would say a lab notebook would say, here's a list of the 3 colorings, which I guess they do in Appendix 1.
Okay.
And they're summarizing their findings here.
Okay.
So the lab notebooky things, if you want to include them, they're appendixy things. Okay. So let's see. So we've had various critiques along these lines. Well, there's more of this.
Conjecture instead of experiment.
Yeah, better.
Yeah.
Yes.
We would like to refine it as well. There's also a better version of the sentence that you did too.
That's nice, isn't it? I like that introductory sentence, that little paragraph at the beginning.
But now, I kind of liked how the other one described their experimental evidence, whereas here it says like they decided to not include that at all. They're kind of talking about.
And they tell you a few of the arguments that they thought of. At least it's divisible by 6. Okay.
I don't like starting a sentence with a number.
Oh, with a number? Huh. How could you?
Tolerability is not very limited.
So this 3 here, you don't like the 3 there. How would you change that? What would you do in place of that?
They're not in grind. If you
DeLong, what would you do?
I mean, like, so in general, so here you can do many things, like, as you said, the not invariant. Or in general, you can just say, I would say, we know that.
I don't actually dislike
We
this.
proved that. We have shown that.
Do you think that writing out THREE would solve it?
No.
You don't like that?
You can't have a number. You can't. If something has like a number hyphen thing, you can't put a word number.
Okay.
That definitely breaks the rules.
I guess so. I never heard that rule. I'll go with
It's
it.
not an actual rule but I mean, I don't think you just don't see people do that very often.
Okay.
I don't know
Okay.
why.
Yeah. Okay. So beginning sentence with a symbol of any kind is generally frowned upon for reasons that I've never been able to figure out.
Yeah, 'cause like, I don't
confusing,
actually,
right?
this
It's
is something
like-
easy to read.
I think it's because when people read, they expect a sentence to begin with a capitalized word and to end with a period.
So you
And
lose
that
the cue.
expectation
You
is
lose the
lost.
capitalization cue if you use a symbol like S.
So it's just a readability issue.
So we just need to develop capital.
Which of course in the end don't have to be better. One could of course also get experimental follow-up.
What's wrong with that?
Well, of course.
Why? What's wrong with that?
I don't know, it's kind of more informal.
It's not bad.
How do you say one could get experimental?
It's a little dismissive. One could, of course, get experimenters. I don't actually mind it. It's a little. It's a little. What does that do to you, Susan?
It makes me wonder, well, then why do you
why didn't you do it? Yeah, it's a little dismissive. Like, this is below us to do this. You could do it if you wanted to.
I mean,
but-
it's just a general reminder of the obvious superiority, basically. It's
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
so bad.
yeah. Maybe that's what you're objecting to. There's an arrogance of the author that comes out by that a little bit. I wouldn't say it's really wrong. It's just sort of revealing some feature of the personality of the author. All right. All right, there's more of this. And so on.
Ah, so they separate the conjectures and experimental evidence.
Yeah, which is good, right? And
Okay.
they have theoretical evidence. So, but they still have this empirical fact. So that's another, so empirical fact, is that different from a conjecture?
Does that seem ambiguous enough that I would?
I think empirical fact is, it's an oxymoron.
It's basically, I mean, there's no reason not to be more precise in this.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we're gonna finish. Citations. You have to cite your references. You have to cite the references that you use in the paper, and make a bibliography. The example, I don't have bibliographical entries here on these slides. There are examples on the website that you can find.
Also,
There's a standard form for bibliographical referencing. Cite all the references you use, but don't cite any references you don't use. So if there are entries in your bibliography that you haven't used, that's not good either.
What do they use?
Don't use anything.
If you don't use anything, you don't need any bibliography. That's fine.
So, a lot of times, if you use things that are sort of, you know it from a general knowledge or something.
Yep.
I've never really understood exactly what the rules or conventions of when you're supposed to find a citation like a textbook or something.
So I think
It's
you have, this is a question of who your audience is. Because you have to, the citations serve two purposes. They serve the purpose of declaring where you got your information and protecting you against plagiarism. But they also serve a purpose of helping the reader find out information about what you're talking about. And so it depends on what your audience is, what sort of general references you want to cite. And that's a decision that you make as part of your imagining of who your audience is. So, you know, he might, earlier on when he was talking about F3, he might have referred to some book which talked about finite fields. Maybe he did, maybe he
It's fairly
didn't.
reasonable to assume what F3 is.
Maybe, I think the decision could go either way. It depends. It's a question of being consistent with your target audience. Right. And again, it's always essential to say to make it clear whether you're using results that you got from somewhere else or results that you've obtained yourself. Yeah, and well, when you make a reference, so what's wrong with these citations? It says poor citations. What's wrong with them?
Useful where for what? And then like we would use that further comment. I feel like it's not necessarily the citation that's bad. It's the problem that's bad is using them without further comment.
What's wrong with the first one?
It's pretty similar. So
You should separate
like useful for what?
What's what?
Maybe you should separate the three different citations and not put them all.
I put them all in separate brackets. That's a kind of thing that maybe some journals would object to, and some would think it's okay. For me, gosh, that's an awful lot of literature to have thrust in front of me. It just seems vague to me.
Is there something actively wrong with the way it's cited? Or is
No, I think it's okay.
It's the usage.
It's just kind of useless. Is that why it's here as an example of a poor citation?
Because I didn't write this, I'm not sure. But it could be because it really doesn't. If the question is, what does the reader need?
Yeah.
If the reader wants a probability textbook, then choose one that is going to be good
Yeah.
and suggest that one.
Yeah, and be as precise as you can. As a general thing, be as precise as you can about pointing the reader to a specific place instead of just saying, this book might be useful to you. That's not actually that
So
helpful.
if you use results without further comment for the second one, that will generically make your reader's life more difficult because then they'll have to like do some pattern matching, try to figure out what here goes to what in there. And it's basically, and you've already done the work. Why not give that to your reader?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The third one doesn't seem as bad, honestly.
I just have to wonder what it was in 3 that was inspiring him and where in 3 it was, at the least. Tell us where it was in 3.
I guess it might be better to say like, analogously to blah in 3.
How about the 5 theorem 7? Now you're being accurate about.
But you might as well just put in the actual text of the theorem.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's what is it? If I'm actually going to get something out of this, I have to know what theorem 7 was.
What you could say is like theorem blah point blah for this paper, brackets 5 from 5.
Yeah, right. Maybe before this there was a long text that explained what theorem 7 was, and this 5 theorem 7 is just the reference. But I don't think that's. Agreed?
So I'm just going back to the first one. There is another issue here which we haven't talked about yet, which is that the purpose of citation is not only for facts but also for presentation. And one possible motivation behind the first citation is if the author used those textbooks and based the background section very closely on the textbooks, and the author put that citation in as a way to somehow indicate that the background section came from these textbooks, that's not sufficiently informative.
So it seems like the third one is kind of doing something similar to that, right? It's largely saying, so
yeah.
what would an
but
example of a good way to do what?
Is there a good example on the next slide how to do that?
Oh, maybe. Let's see. This is supposed to be good examples.
So that first one, if from the textbook you're using the notation, then it's more specific. It makes clearer what you're taking from the sources.
Yeah, you can see that every one of these is more specific than any one on the first slide, really. Specificity is really essential. You can refer to web sites, put down the URL, and the practice I've seen is to have people give the date on which they accessed the web site, typical standard.
So if we look at a paper online, but it's published in a journal, should we still cite like the
Yeah, then you that's a good question. My practice is to give the journal entry and not worry about the web presence. But I've seen other people do other things as well.
The exception might be if, so sometimes what you find online is someone retyped the paper.
Yeah.
And you can tell because there are all sorts of typos. In that case, ideally you should go and find the original and cite the original. But if for some reason you couldn't, then you would cite the web page.
All right, there's lots more to say. Right, so this is you'll write this paper, you'll write a first draft, but that first draft won't really be your first draft because it'll be the product of a series of revisions internal to your group. Everybody rewrites things over and over again. You write something out and realize that the order could be done differently, and if you have the time and the energy, that's what you do, is fix it. You're working as a team. Read each other's writing. And right, if you can't read your teammates' text, then you better believe that we can't read it either. So the first draft is a first draft, but make it your best shot at the final draft. Don't put the onus on us to fix things that you know how to fix. But on the other hand, I can guarantee you that every single paper is going to have suggested changes. You may not think that they're always improvements, and that's fine. We can have a discussion about that. But you'll always have. There's always more to do, and not just in the writing. But part of the point of these debriefings is for us all to discuss what the mathematics is, and there may be some completion of the math as well that'll be suggested as part of the debriefing. So it's not just more writing. Practice makes perfect, or at least it makes better. And the skills of mathematical writing really convert over, they translate over to all kinds of writing. Being precise and organization and avoiding too much padding. Okay. Any last minute questions? So this is up on the web if you want to look at it some more. There's also that essay about math writing and some examples, and there's plenty of material. If you have other ideas of things that should go up on the website by way of examples and things, let me know.